life's a struggle. It's been a struggle for me. It's a struggle for you, Brian. It's a struggle for everybody. It's a struggle for everybody. I am a rock, I am an island. Don't go near people, they hurt you. That was my attitude. And actually, when I became a Christian at the age of 35, one of the first things that I think the Lord said to me was, join the Samaritans. You can help people. I need to tell him I'm a Christian. And I need to tell him there's more important things than the company. There's more important things than money. I went up to him, I said, look, Marty, I'm very happy to do this, but you need to know something. Number one, there's God. Number two, there's a family, and then there's a company. You may rest assured I will work hard, but there's that priority. I can stand up and speak. I can talk about families. I can talk about the things which matter to me. Why is the UK so poor in productivity? Could it be connected to also the graph which shows we have a lot of family breakdown? The bloke in the office who's getting a divorce, is he going to work very well? He's going to be stressed, he's going to be anxious. The richness comes from giving and receiving. That's where the family and family policy is so important, because it brings something rich into society and supportive for society.
The world is changing. Inspiration is everywhere. It has never been so easy to connect, share, and bring people together. We're learning from others and finding the best in ourselves. Challenging our beliefs. Sharing our vulnerability. Overcoming our fears. Transforming ourselves so we can transform the world. How far can we go?
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is... This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Lord Michael Farmer, the businessman, philanthropist, former Conservative Party treasurer, and member of the House of Lords. You started your career as an account clerk in the London Metal Exchange in 1963 at age 18, earning £8 a week. Today, you are one of the founders of the Red Kite Group, a metals trading and investment firm with $2 billion in assets. In 2014, you became a baron and took a seat in the House of Lords and have been active in championing policies that strengthen families, fight homelessness and domestic abuse, and advocate prison reform. You've also used your 50 years experience in the city to inform good practice and new regulations for the financial markets, while also being a staunch advocate of Britain leaving the European Union. Lord Farmer, welcome to London Real.
Thank you very much, Brian. Pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Pleasure to have you here. I've been looking forward to this for a long time. So much to talk about. I want to talk about the House of Lords, to your policies, to the city, to the role of religion and family. But in doing some research for this, I started thinking about my own childhood and my own family. And, you know, one of the realizations I had was that those years affected who I became as an adult. And one of my earliest memories was my parents getting divorced when I was 7 years old. And my sister and brother had different reactions, but my reaction was, people can't be trusted. And I'm going to have to rely on myself, and people potentially are paying for me. So the 7-year-old Brian became self-reliant, probably to a dangerous degree, and went on to do these things and put myself in these situations to test myself, I think. And I went to MIT, and I went to Wall Street, and I went to the city. And when I look back at that behavior, I'm always wondering how much of that was because of the family. And I know you had a challenging upbringing. I know your father died when you were 4 years old, and I know, your parents were both alcoholics, and you spent time at the state boarding school. And I know there was a Simon and Garfunkel song that you kind of used to think about and refer to called "I Am a Rock." And I was wondering if you could tell us about that song and maybe a little bit about your early years.
Yes, fine. Thank you, Brian. Yes, I am a rock, I am an island. It's quite actually similar, the sort of feelings I had as what you were describing for yourself. I mean, I think a divorce a parental separation is known in the right circles as an ACE, adverse childhood experience. And you only need a few of those, I think 4 adverse childhood experiences to, when you grow up, to have quite serious problems during life. And in fact, if you got 4 or 5 of them, you could well end up in prison, etc., etc. I mean, my father was an alcoholic. He died from it, from falling over, brain hemorrhage when I was 4, so I didn't really know him. My mother was an alcoholic. You had the neglect and shame associated with that, and the poverty. Actually, we lost everything. And actually, my sister suffered more than I did because she was at home, and I actually did go to a boarding school where you have stability, you have peer relationships which are stable, you have almost foster parental relations. If you've got good masters, you don't always have good masters because in those days there's quite a lot of beatings going on and that sort of thing. But there was, certainly when I grew up, I mean, I did actually come to a recognition in my teens that my mother, with the alcoholism, which was bad for me, very ugly, I hated it. But then I had one evening when we were having an argument about the television channel, only 2 television channels in those days. And she was drunk, and in the end, she was swearing at me, and I thought, well, actually, she needs to go to bed. And I was 15 or so, and I just went over and I said, Mommy, pick her up. And I just moved her over to the door, put her outside the door, closed the door, and put my foot against it, and said, go to bed. And she went to bed, and she didn't remember a thing in the morning, of course. But from then on, there was this sort of different relationship where I recognized that actually here was somebody who wasn't to be criticized. She was to be helped, actually. So you needed sympathy. And I think it was good for me. And she certainly, I think the drinking reduced thereafter. But you sort of grow up and you are aware that you're alone, apart from my mother. And there is this, I am a rock, I am an island. So you start work. I started work at £8 a week. And one way and another, I sort of climbed up the ladder. But I am a rock, I am an island. Don't go near people, they hurt you, And actually, when I became a Christian at the age of 35, one of the first things that I think the Lord said to me was, join the Samaritans. You can help people. So I joined this. I tried to join the Samaritans, but I had a training course, and there was a lawyer actually in charge of it. I think his name was Jonathan, and I was sitting with a group of people, and he started off, my name's Jonathan, and I like people. I thought, you what? You like people? I said, people are horrible. People hurt you. You don't want to let them come near you. And that was my attitude. You can't trust anybody. You can't rely on anybody. You just got to do it yourself, rather like you stated.
Yeah, and I looked up the lyrics of that song, and I mean, I almost started, crying when I was reading it, because it says, I'm a rock, I'm an island. I've built walls, a fortress deep and mighty, that none may penetrate. I have no need of friendship. Friendship causes pain. I am shielded by my armor.
Exactly.
Hiding in my room, safe within my womb. I touch no one, and no one touches me.
Exactly. That sums it up completely. But that's how I think a lot of children today grow up, with the proliferation of family breakdown and this sort of Western hyper-liberal individualism that's sort of encouraged by governments, by their policies, that the value of committed, strengthening relationships is just not perceived. And in fact, I think there have been conscious policies against it, against the family.
Yeah. And we're feeling the ramifications of that, and we will feel it again in 10 or 20 years if we don't make those changes.
Oh, it's happening the whole time. My campaign in the House of Lords is all to do with families and getting the government to understand the importance of strengthening families. I mean, it started off with the Ministry of Justice actually asking me to do these two prison reviews. And it was on their own statistic, which I was very thankful for, that prisoners who receive family visits are 39% less likely to reoffend than those who don't. And the reoffending rates over here at that time when I did the review was 43% reoffending rates. Intergenerational transmission of criminality was over 60% from parent to child. And in fact, in the female line, it was even higher than the males, over 60%. So it's shocking. And it was and here was a sudden statistic which said actually families are important. And it's, when you get into Parliament, there's very much, you can't come along with an opinion. You have to have the research and the data behind it, which is one of the things I learnt to my cost to begin with. I can't just stand up and I think this, I think that. You have to have the research. And here was this wonderful statistic, which no one could argue with. And it was the Ministry of Justice's own figure.
Let's talk about your work in the House of Lords. But first, maybe we have to talk about what is the House of Lords, because many of our audience in America might not understand. They probably have seen Question Time in the House of Commons, and they don't know the difference between the House of Commons, the House of Lords. But maybe you can give us a quick history brief on how
I'm not sure I can give you a quick history brief. House of Lords goes back, to almost the original parliaments. That they were all made up of the very well-to-do and the aristocracy. That's what Parliament was packed full of. Today, it has obviously the whole process of the spreading the vote out. So the elected chamber it now has prominence, priority over the role of the House of Lords, which has become more scrutinizing, revising and amending legislation which gets passed up to it from the Commons. However, the House of Lords still does have power to reject legislation, although there is the Salisbury Convention which says that we can amend and send back, and if the Commons sends it back again, then we are in this process of ping pong, it's called, and in the end we have to give way. But that's only on policies, on bills which are connected to the government's manifesto at the time of the election. So it's worked on the argument that they were elected on these promises and the House of Lords shouldn't stand in the way. If the government brings a bill in which was not in the manifesto, then actually the House of Lords still has the power to reject it. And in the current state of affairs, the House of Lords has a majority in opposition to the government. So, that's just telling you the current position. But to get into the House of Lords, you're actually appointed by the Queen. In reality, the Prime Minister gives the Queen a list. There has been vetting and all sorts of other things going on. But the members of the House of Lords are obviously many political people who have been ministers or members of the Commons or been maybe in local council or even in trade unions, whatever. You have medics, medical professors, academics, a lot of legal people, a lot of lawyers, ex-judges, etc. So there is, the age profile is much older. I think the average age is actually over 70, 75 almost. But there is the wisdom there. And it is a place where you can have a reasoned debate. There is a requirement for courtesy. We're not allowed to say you. We say the noble lord has said this, or the noble baroness has said this. We have these if you like, slightly old-fashioned ways of talking to one another, but it maintains a courteous relationship where debate can take place. And I heard there was a saying whereby it said, basically, it was saying it's better to debate a subject and not to have an agreement than not to have a conclusion than to have a conclusion without a debate. And I think the House of Lords is one of the few places you can have that reasoned debate. So if you read Hansard, it's very different to the debate in the Commons.
Yeah, and it shows. I mean, and again, the House of Commons are elected by the people based on geographies throughout the United Kingdom, 650
right.
constituents there. And then House of Lords, 797, I think, appointed for life.
Yep.
And because you have that life appointment,
Yep.
you can, and you have that wisdom, you can kind of go deeper and really construct policies over time that mean a lot to you,
Yep.
that you can then send to the House of Commons, whereas, and this is maybe a generalization, the House of Commons, the people there, they really have to look out for their constituency. They have to help administer that, do what's in the best interest, and also worry about elections every 4 to 5 years.
Absolutely.
And so it's almost like you have more time to do more important long-term work.
Absolutely right. I think it's a huge advantage. I mean, when I was advised, that the Queen was giving me a peerage, I thought, well, this is very nice, and it's very nice for my wife. She'll be, Lady Farmer and sort of. But actually, within a day, I suddenly thought, I can speak. I can stand up and speak. I can talk about families. I can talk about the things which matter to me. And there is that. You're absolutely right. That sort of, not relaxation, but that comfort, that knowing that you're there for as many days as the good Lord gives you on this earth, and you can do your work there, even if you're in opposition, even if you're a lowly backbencher, you can still stand up and speak, and you can still influence. I had a little experience when I came into the House of Lords. You have to do all sorts of filling forms and all sorts of other things. And I was talking to one of the clerks of Parliament there, filling in forms about personal interests and things like that. And I said, look, you don't really need to worry about me. I'm one of the lowest of the low because I'm a sort of backbencher. And he went, excuse me, my lord, you're one of the people who makes the laws which I have to obey. And I thought, oops, right, you put me in my place.
And where does that humility come from? Does that come from working in the city and being in a medals, exchange ring at 18 and being yelled at and having to go through all of that? I mean, how much of the city work prepared you for this, or is that a completely different ballgame?
No, I think being a Christian prepared me. And being a Christian, I became a Christian at 35, and I've been in the city for 17 years by then. I got married when I was 30. And that really sort of changed. And frankly, if you're a Christian, you believe that God is involved in your life. And there have been occasions in my city work, in running a hedge fund, in having very big positions on, for instance, the copper market, with the dominant position sometimes, sort of globally, that one was humbled. I'm just using that, mixing, it's a subject we can talk about a bit, but...
You had an instance at one point where I think there was an American hedge fund that knew your positions and decided to maybe squeeze your copper position, or maybe it was another metal.
Yeah.
And you lost 30% of your fund net worth in 12 days.
Yeah, that was $900 million in 2007.
In 12 days.
Yeah, and I was sleeping 1 hour a night. And I was a Christian, and I was sort of thinking, what's going on here? I'm a Christian, I'm doing Bible studies, I'm going to church, I'm praying. And then somebody said to me, it was a minister, he said, Michael, God is sovereign. He is sovereign. And he's your father. And I was sort of thinking about it, I thought, okay. So he is God Almighty, omnipotent and omniscient, but he is my father, and he gives me good things. So there's something going on here which I don't understand, and I just should relax and just behave in the way that, I think his word guides me to behave, which actually requires humility. You've got to close out positions. You've got to talk to investors about losses. We actually gave back a lot of fees, which we could have kept, but we did that. And in fact, one of the investors said, Michael, if you hadn't done that, we would have been off. And it was that sort of thing going on, but it was a very humbling position. And then afterwards, I was thinking to myself, well, what was the good that came out of this? I thought, well, what was it? And then I thought, humility. That's what it was. There I was, doing very well. And even though I thought, one sort of humble Christian guy doing good things, actually there was this in here, actually I'm not a bad guy, I'm doing pretty well. Actually, look at me compared to everybody else, thank you very much. And then all of a sudden you're humbled. And actually, humility is a great gift. It's a great gift and very difficult to receive because we all have that inherent pride within us. All of us do. We all want to be somebody, and to actually be given the gift of humility or to go along that path of growing in humility is a very gracious gift of God, I think.
A $900 million gift.
Yep.
Expensive lesson.
Yeah,
but,
sure.
But worth every dollar.
Yeah, more so, I'd say, yes. So, yeah.
Tell me about the city, because, I left the city almost 9 years ago. And you've spoken about these kind of false idols in the city. Again, back to me when I was 7 years old, I just thought that if I accomplished something, then maybe I'd have some worth. Maybe I think that's what I was doing. And I taught myself that money would buy me happiness. And I was in my head for 40 years, Michael. And at one point, I was watching my quarterly income, and they paid us quarterly at ICAP. And I realized that as my income went up, I became less happy. And it took my 4-year degree at MIT to realize there was a reverse correlation. And I better do something different with my life or I'm going to be upset. I was alone. I was depressed. I was drinking myself to death. I had no family and no friends. And I thought, I got to stop doing this. And I started doing this, which is taking me on a different adventure. But it's hard to get out of that feeling in the city. What do you see there, especially as a Christian, and why do so many people get stuck in it?
Well, I think you put your finger on it. It's money. I mean, when I started, when I was 18, I was, I had no clue really, but I just worked hard, and I was sent to Germany to learn German. Worked in a German firm over there. It was when I was 21, great experience. Came back and then climbed the ladder, became one of the youngest sort of ring traders in the open outcry market, and sort of climbed up and realized actually, when I got into this very sort of powerful firm that sort of was a global physical trader merchant of metals, and particularly copper, that I realized actually money was at the heart of it. It was really, rather like an eye-opener. I mean, when in my sort of mid-20s, that actually it was all about money. And I'd been sort of naive not to realize that beforehand. But once I realized that, everything was sort of, you could all your thoughts worked, what's the risk reward? How much can we lose? How much profit can we make, etc. So you sort of learn these things. But then becoming a Christian, I was doing well. I mean, we were been married 5 years, started having children. I was doing reasonably well, and then all of a sudden, this whole area of being a Christian and working in the city. I remember I used to travel in on the train and I'd be thinking about God and be reading the Bible and be thinking about all sorts of questions and talking this sort of stuff. And then I'd get in the elevator in the city, go up there. God will be gone. The whole day would be gone. Get in the lift at the end of the day, God will come back. And it suddenly occurred to me after a while, God's not with me. I'm not with him in the workplace. It's all about money. And then that whole area of developing, growing, in biblical understanding, the studies, etc., listening to sermons, but praying and talking to other Christians, that I was thinking, well, the city, I often had people saying to me, how can you as a Christian work in the city? It's all about money. How can you do that? And I had to think about that. And then what it did was it sort of cleared up the idols that are in the city. And I think particularly it became very clear to me, money is obviously an idol. You described it yourself, Brian. It gives you everything, apparently. It gives you the freedom. It gives you the house, the healthcare, the holidays, the reputation, it seems to be the God to bow down to, all right? You've also got the company, the whole corporate culture where you're climbing that ladder. It's a competitiveness with one another, and there's a bowing down to the company. And when I actually joined, when I was with Phoebe Salomon at the end of the 80s, they invited me onto the global board governing all their trading, and I was going to be in charge of base metals. And I was invited to this board, and I just thought, well, okay, I'll think about it. And there was a sort of little bell ringing in the back of my head, and I thought, well, I'll go away and I'll come back to you tomorrow, Marty, and I'll tell you. And I sort of prayed about it, and then in the middle of the night, I woke up and I just thought, I need to tell him I'm a Christian, and I need to tell him there's more important things than the company. There's more important things than money. So the next day I went up to him. I said, look, Marty, I'm very happy to do this, but you need to know something.
This is a managing director of Salomon Brothers.
This was the boss in New York. Okay. And he was a Jewish chap, and I said, look, I'm a Christian, so number one, there's God. Number two, there's a family, and then there's a company. And you may rest assured, I will work hard, but there's that priority. And these things are important to me, and I won't sacrifice them. And he actually said to me, I have Talmudic studies every week. And I said, well, very good, but I mean, it was sort of bouncing the conversation about, but that whole area of prioritizing God and family before work was quite difficult. And you had to concentrate on it, and you had to be disciplined. So, city lunches, okay? You were at ICAP. I mean, I know they used to love city lunches. I mean, they were the thing. And I just had to learn, how do I not have city lunches where you're drinking and talking and, etc. And in the end, you have to learn to say no. And that was a big thing for me to learn, is to say no to these things, and no to go away on a weekend company get together, strengthening one another, where there's all sorts of things might be going on. Just say no, I'm with the family. And it didn't hurt me. Saying no didn't hurt me.
Yeah. I said no a few times to some of my clients, and they respected it.
Yeah.
I said, if you want to do that, there's a bunch of other brokers that can take you out there, but I just don't do that.
Exactly.
We can do other things. We can go play squash. We can go do this. We can go do that. But I don't want to do that thing.
Exactly.
And surprisingly, it was okay, and they respected it if they understood it. My colleagues maybe not as much, but you were able to find that line in the city.
Yes. Well, in the end, I was ending up as a sort of boss, so I had to discipline myself really, but even beforehand, it was just I was saying no, and they respected that. And I, as a Christian, I said to other Christians, don't be ashamed of the Lord. Don't be ashamed of Jesus. If you keep your head above the parapet, but as a Christian, don't be ashamed of him, because if you are, I mean, in Mark it says, if you're ashamed of me, I'll be ashamed of you, which is a very tough verse, frankly. But just be upfront about it. And then I found that he was there and he was protecting me. I mean, people did respect, I mean, we were called the God Squad at times. Our Financial Times called us the God Squad in the city and that sort of thing. And I think, I've heard people sort of respected us, because we had the sort of, I guess, more integrity than they thought city people should have.
Maybe they thought you had an extra member on your team too, looking out for you.
Exactly.
And let's talk about religion while we're here. And I want to get back to your policies in the House of Lords. How did that happen for you? Because I don't think you grew up with it.
No, I didn't really. Although at boarding school there was chapel, and I mean, I was aware of the Christian faith. I had an aunt who was a missionary, actually, and she tried to have some influence, but she'd been a missionary in Kenya and in Nepal, in leper colonies, things like that. I didn't see her that often, and she was considered by the rest of the family as a quirky person, sort of thing.
She'd given you a Holy Bible, I think.
She did, yes, that's right. And the verse inside of it was, I think, Psalm 119, verse 18, Lord, open my eyes that I may behold wonderful things in your law. And as a child, I used this leather-bound Bible. It was a valuable possession. I didn't really read it, except for this verse. And I never quite knew what it meant, But there was that prayer, Lord, open my eyes that I may behold wonderful things in your law. And that's what he did. He's been opening my eyes ever since. And I can behold wonderful things in his law. So I sort of grew up just, I would say, like anybody else. All right, except I was an island. I was a rock, I was an island. But worldly, I mean, in the 60s, you had the, promiscuity coming along, drugs, thankfully I never really got involved in. I mean, it was early drug days. Certainly, my father was an alcoholic. I started drinking a bit, but actually I had a very good piece of advice by a commissioner. In the city you had these commissioners in there. They used to be ex-army, and they used to have these uniforms, and they used to be messengers around the city. There was a chap called Sergeant Simmons when I was in my early 20s, and I think he saw me coming in with a hangover one day. And he just said, Michael, just let me give you a word of advice. He said, just stick to beer. He said, avoid the spirits, stick to beer. And I thought, well, that's good. Somebody gave me a piece of advice. Nobody else gave me anything like that. And it really stuck. And I thought, okay, I can see the danger. I've got the danger in my history, so I'll, and that's what I did. And I think that actually helped me a lot during the 20s, my 20s, when I wasn't a Christian.
In the late 60s when it was all kicking off in London.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you remember about the late 40s, 50s, 60s in London? Like what comes out? I mean, it was hard times for the city.
Yeah, I was born in 44, but I mean, those days, and I didn't live in London then, we lived in Berkshire, but there were hard post-war days, and Britain was paying back debt to America, and it was a hard time. Rationing still went on, but in a way there was still that I won't say purity, but there was simplicity of life, and the family life, and those values were still there in society. Whereas when you get to the 60s, with particularly the pop culture and this sort of liberalization and this gradual acceptance of whatever goes. This philosophy I always used to think, just do whatever you want to do, just don't hurt somebody else, however you define that. But that sort of culture started developing. So I was, but I was by myself. So I was a rock and I was an island. So actually, when I got married at the age of 30, and that sort of changed our lives, and moved outside, and then the first baby came along when I was 35, and it was at that point I became a Christian, which was a bit of a Damascus Road experience.
And how did that happen? Because that would have been the last thing we would have ever predicted that happened to Michael Farmer at that time.
No, that's right. Well, I used to. There were a number of things that happened. We lived in the fields. I mean, we had a house out in the fields in Buckinghamshire. Just cutting the grass, going for walks, just what I would call creation. You call it nature. The rhythm of it, the cycle, the fruitfulness of it, seeing the apples on the apple tree, seeing the wheat grow every year, seeing the harvests come, seeing the seasons change. That was a big, slow influence coming in that, one was thinking about, what is this place? The stars and the sky, the moon, the sun. What am I? This conscious human being, which is hugely complex. The whole place is so hugely complex. We're only finding out how complex it is today, and yet it works. It works. It's extraordinary. So I had that sort of going on in my head the whole time. I suppose this exposure. I mean, the Psalms say, the heavens declare the glory of God. There is this speech that pours out from creation to every human being, no matter what language you speak. You understand it, and no man has any excuse. It's there. And I think that was pouring in on me. And then we had the first baby, and I was thinking, who's this? Who is this person? And it was just this new baby being formed, this new human being coming from sort of nowhere. And so that was really another thing. And there were a couple of other things. Local minister of a church quite some way away, he knocked on the door one night. And he said, my name's Nick Maloney, and I just come to see how you are. We've been there a few years, and nobody else ever knocked on the door. We were right outside. I'd come and have a cup of tea, and anyway, we got to know him a bit, and he never mentioned God. But I thought afterwards, well, nobody else has ever knocked on the door and asked us how we are. And then there was somebody we were trying to help who was having difficulties in their marriage, and we asked, my wife asked our doctor actually, how can we help? Because we didn't know how to help. And I don't think he was a Christian, but the doctor was an old man. He said, try and encourage her to mix with people who go to church. And I came back from work from the city, and I said, what? Try and encourage her to mix with people who go to church. That's a very funny thing to say. And then I thought, well, actually, they'll probably try and be kind. They'll probably try and help her. Actually, that's probably pretty good advice, actually. And there were these sort of things going on, which then come as a dramatic moment. So it is a Damascus Road experience that, basically in the middle of the night, just heard one word, which was Michael. Just
Clear.
It was quite clear. It was just Michael. And all I said, I didn't have any choice, was yes, Lord. And in front of my eyes was Jesus Christ as the Son of God. I mean, it was this sort of white knowledge, certainty, Jesus Christ, the Son of God. And I thought, this changes everything. This just changes everything. I have to find out. I have to learn. Who is Jesus Christ? What does this mean? And I thought, well, I better start going to church. I thought I'd better start reading the Bible. I have to find out. I have to learn. And I would say that when asked about this, I said, if you want convincing that this was the Lord speaking, when I was thinking, I have to go to church, you know what thought next came into my head? When you go to church, don't let them make you treasurer. You have to learn. And guess what they did? I went to this little church nearby, and it was a little church. Here I am, doing reasonably well in the city. Michael, would you like to be treasurer? No. And before I knew where I was in a teaching church in the city of London as well. Okay. And one learned, as a Christian, you never cease learning about God. He is beyond learning. So you're always on that journey.
And were you always comfortable telling this story, or did it take time before you could share this?
I'm sort of cautious about it, because what I don't want to do is to sort of give the impression that this sort of experience you've got to be a Christian. Because, I mean, there are many other examples in my own family, but elsewhere, people come to know the Lord. They have their eyes opened gradually, often. And you might say that I had, at school, chapel experiences. In those days, you had scripture lessons. So I had some background knowledge. I mean, it didn't just come from nowhere. And so I'm just cautious about that, but that's what happened. So I sort of think, well, that's what happened. So I should actually tell it as it is, because otherwise I'm concealing something which actually happened. Yeah. And it did change my life. It completely changed my life. And it's been great ever since. You've got that, fundamental relationship. Again, it's like when I was talking about the city, whereby, where'd you go? I remember a story when I went to Romania with a friend from the church here in the city in the late Ceausescu days. I was a pastor in a church in Lugoj near Timișoara, and they were being quite badly persecuted. And but we heard the story of this other pastor who had been put in the Securitate headquarters, arrested and kept in isolation for a number of years, actually. And after the revolution, this pastor actually was with an American visitor, I think a pastor, walking around Bucharest, and they came into this square, and there was the Securitate headquarters. And he'd been talking about how he'd been in this cell by himself. You never knew whether you were going to live or die the next day. And he just went up to this building and put his arms around the cornerstone. And he said, "Lord, what good times we had together in here." And it's that position where sometimes you have to lose everything to have everything. You have nothing but the Lord. It's a great position spiritually to be in, but it's not something any of us want particularly.
No, not at the time. I've had some moments of those. And
yeah, exactly.
They're the greatest teaching moments, and some of the greatest success comes from them.
Yeah.
But they're very dark at the time.
Yeah, that's right.
And when you joined the House of Lords, I think you had a similar experience where you said, how much can religion be spoken about in here? And I think you came to a similar conclusion that you had to be just as open as you were in the city.
Well, it's a prayer, but it takes guts, frankly. So where do I get guts from? Lord, give me courage. I was involved with what was called the suicide bill. It was the bill allowing help for people who wanted to kill themselves. I've forgotten the name of it at the moment. But and we were sort of a little group, a few Christians in it, who were sort of getting together policy and sort of constructive plans against not allowing this bill to go through Parliament, which actually succeeded because in the end the Commons voted it out. But at one stage I was warned by another member of the House of Lords, Michael, when you stand up, do not mention God. And I was actually shocked. If you mention God, they will stop listening and they will think you're irrational. And I was really quite shocked, and it sort of, it troubled me that. And in fact, I spoke to some quite well-known Christian leaders about it, and they weren't all that helpful, actually. It was almost like, well, you should be talking to the spirit of the age, the culture of the age, which a lot of the bishops seem to do. I mean, frankly, one very rarely hears them mention God when they stand up and contribute to debates. And it's quite difficult there, but pray about it. So, and I mean, there was one occasion we had talking about palliative care with people who are dying. And there's a lot of debate going on about making them comfortable, drugs, family visits, all that sort of, all the whole area of palliative care. And I stood up and I said, well, we're we're missing the whole area of spiritual palliative care. Do you know who speaks about eternal life more than anybody else in the whole Bible? It's Jesus. That's why he came, that we might have eternal life. And here are people on the edge of eternity.
To continue watching the rest of the episode for free, visit our website londonreal.tv or click the link in the description below.